So last night talked a little bit about getting uncomfortable and had several messages um, via Twitter last night and today, talking about getting uncomfortable and why that's important and really how hey, Steph, all you got to do is ask. All you got to do is ask. Uh, as we think about getting uncomfortable in our own situations, right? Whatever that looks like, how do we take advantage of getting uncomfortable? And it's critical that we do that for a lot of reasons, right? One is because it allows us to stretch and learn and help understand our own situations that much better. So last night really talked about that kind of global perspective, challenging ourselves to get uncomfortable and think about things just a little bit different. So again, had a lot of different kind of messages going back and forth with some people about um, how do we get uncomfortable in our own daily lives? And some of us do that naturally or more natural than others. But as you think about influences in our lives, whether that, I know one thing going around social media is Mr. Rogers. And you think about Mr. Rogers and the neighborhood and some of the issues that he tackled really that were outside of the norm back in the day, and probably a lot of us grew up with that. And then you think about Dr. Seuss. Dr. Seuss also had an underlying message. And a lot of these things that we were engaged with had an underlying message about stretching us, and whether that was acceptance or stepping out of our comfort zone or something that maybe we weren't going to see otherwise. That was important, right? So I tagged this one Vietnam from our trip that we took with the Illinois Ag Leadership Program. We stopped in Hong Kong, and I don't want. I kind of want to take that one towards later because this one, by way of Vietnam, was the culture shock. And I alluded to some of that last night. I think there were a few comments made last night on Supper with Sean about that. But having been to South Africa before and seen culture differently, Vietnam was still a culture shock. And for a lot of reasons, right? And so as we're sitting on the bus, for me, a lot of the bus time was spent simply looking out the window, trying to process everything that you were seeing as we drove by these people, these places, these shops. And for most of us, we arrived late at night, so we got to see a little bit of the traffic, but it wasn't until the next day that we fully understood the impact of how the culture was different. So really getting uncomfortable in a place that I'd never been. They did speak English, or at least street signs were pretty well in English, more so in Hanoi than in Saigon or Ho Chi Minh City down in the southern part of the country. But by way of us landing in Hanoi, seeing a very different place, right? Very different from the standpoint of there are 9 million people, 6 million motorbikes. Those motorbikes are running every which direction. Some are going the wrong way, going right against traffic. Some of them are going with traffic. Some of them are going across traffic. Literally, any which direction they could go, they go. And we were told before we left, but we were reminded by our tour guide that as you cross the street, don't stop walking. You continue to walk. The bikes will go around you. And a couple things that really I think I want to parallel with that is I just think about what does that mean? That the first thing in life, we get so distracted by things going on around us. It was very easy to get distracted by motorbikes coming at you every which direction, and that we're always told to look both ways and be careful when you cross the street and don't let them hit you, and all of these things that are programmed into our mind, that now all of a sudden we had to get uncomfortable and walk across the street, sometimes with hundreds of motorbikes coming at you, but you just walked. And I think in life we have to continue walking, even though we have things coming at us, frustrations, challenges, motorbikes, whatever that is. We have to continue to keep walking and not get distracted, because there are people who will get distracted. And the prime example, and even when we were at the embassy over in Vietnam, the director there even told us, like, that is the problem that Americans run into when they get over there, is they stop because that's what we're trained to do, or that's what we think we're supposed to do. They stop and they get hit by a motorbike. And that's what happens in life, right? If we stop because we got uncomfortable, now all of a sudden we get run over, we get hit, we get sidelined or blindsided, whatever you want to call it, we don't move forward. So part of getting uncomfortable is moving forward in situations that don't always feel comfortable, but I feel like we have to do that. And so that's one lesson learned there. The other part of it, though, for Vietnam was, as you think about all of these bicycles, these motorbikes, bicycles, cars, vehicles coming at you, right? You were walking in front of cars, and they would stop. They would not lay on their horn that you were crossing and slowing them down. The motorbikes wouldn't lay on their horn. None of that existed. The only reason we saw people using their horn was to let the fellow motorbike next to them or in front of them know that they were there. That was it. All of the buses, the turn signals, whenever the turn signal's on, there's a noise that's going off with it of various sorts. But it wasn't a rushed, hurried, I'm going to lay on the horn, I'm going to be frustrated and irritated with you because you made me stop or you made me go around. That was not the case. So I think lesson number 2 was, as we think about how rushed and hurried we are, there are 6 million motorbikes and 9 million people in Vietnam, in Hanoi where we were, and they weren't in a hurry. So part of this is that we have to think about, what is it around us? Who is around us? How are they making an impact in our lives? Are we paying attention to it? Because life is too short as it is. So we don't need to get caught up in the whole 9 million people, 6 million motorbikes, and we're too busy. Those people all got where they were going. Now, there are 35 people a day that die on motorbikes over there. So it is dangerous, but nonetheless, it's something I think we need to consider is, do we slow down just a little bit as we go about our daily lives, take in what's going on around us, understand that everybody is on a mission to get somewhere and go somewhere and do something and be something. But by us honking and wailing and being mad and being too busy, that doesn't seem to be the answer. And so getting uncomfortable over there, seeing this, what looks like chaos to us, simply because it was totally abnormal, was not at all chaotic to them. It's normal. Yeah, we are, Brad. It's all about instant gratification. But the final thought I'll leave you with tonight, one of the many in Vietnam, and we'll look, this is probably going to be a 4 or 5 part thing. A lot of things that kind of still weighing on my mind. The other thing about it, though, is that there was, and now the struggle starts, because there's so much that I want to share with you. The other part of it is there were no beggars on the street, at least in Hanoi where we started. There were no beggars on the street, and we felt extremely safe walking up and down the streets. Some of them pitch black, didn't know the area, but we walked down them and we felt completely safe. And here's the other thing, that those people, they're not, they don't want to start anything. Culturally, it's not in their heart or their culture to confront someone like we see here in the United States. The other part of that is they all don't have much. They have a motorbike, maybe two, and they have a house, which is very small. Most of us, it's probably the width of some of our bedrooms, and maybe 3 stories high, maybe a little bit deeper, but they have a very, very small living space. They live on top of each other sometimes by way of very close-knit families, close quarters, close-knit families. So for them to be in a small confined space, they don't have the 3-foot comfort zone like we have in the U.S. They don't know that. But they were absolutely content with what they had. And I think, again, that's just another one of those things that as we think about what we have in our lives that we take for granted, and I alluded to this last night, we take way too much for granted. And you've got all of these people over there who are living in far less desirable, that very well could be. There are parts of Oahu that I've been to, but I certainly didn't get around to all of it. But it's all about the culture of people that, while it doesn't necessarily align with what we know or what maybe we comprehend or understand, that's where it starts to stretch us, right? And so that's the challenge, I think, of getting out of our comfort zone, understanding other people's culture, being open to that. Look, we don't have to agree with it. We don't have to necessarily, it's not like I would go live there in that environment, because thankfully I've been blessed not to. But there's a piece of it that understanding their culture and why they do what they do and how they act and how they live and the respect for one another that they have is certainly something that I think the U.S. can learn. Because unfortunately for them, the reason there are no robbings and no beggars is because they don't have anything, right? Their neighbor doesn't have any more than they do generally. They're all just trying to get by. They're all wanting that next meal, and they're all wanting their kid or their children to succeed more than what they've been able to. So some of those things I think are pretty applicable, and I wish that we had some of those things here in the U.S. by way of a little bit more focus on the family, focus on everybody's what they have is a blessing, and that's important. But first and foremost, it's the family and the neighborhood and the culture that really stood out. So anyway, a few thoughts from Vietnam, more to come, maybe tomorrow night, maybe Friday night, but certainly next week we'll chat a little bit more about them. But continue to think about how you get uncomfortable, how you stretch yourself, whether that's international travel, whether that's in your community, whether that's getting involved in something that maybe you're not so comfortable with. But absolutely, Adam. If you have the right path in life, proceed while respecting others, and that goes a long way. So we'll talk a little bit more soon with kind of a part 3 of getting uncomfortable and how we think about stretching ourselves. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a great night, and we'll catch you next time on Supper with Sean.